friends, I'm Sarah. Welcome back to my channel, Sunset Bow Tarot. So today I'm going to be doing kind of a fun VR to a tag. This tag was started by Angel over at Feeding My Soul 1212, and I will have a link to the original video for this tag down in the description box. But it's kind of a fun tag, you know, it's just an opportunity to show off your decks. You know, there's basically a prompt, and for each prompt you pick a deck and just sort of show it off. So I thought that would be really fun, and let's go ahead and get started with the prompts. So the first prompt is a deck you want to use but that for some reason hasn't seen any playtime on your desk. And for this prompt I picked the I'm Here Oracle. This is by Murphy Pines, and the thing about this oracle is it's really lovely, and I know exactly how it fits into my collection. So it comes with a little guidebook. These are the backs. You can see it's really pretty. The artwork of this deck is really sweet. And the way that I had envisioned using this deck is as a companion deck to the Reclaim Oracle. Those of you who have ever used the Reclaim Oracle, you know that it can be kind of, it can really pinpoint like some of what your emotional issues are. And this deck gives you strategies for how to deal with those things. And you know, the figures are also kind of a little blobby and not human looking, but you know, it still has a very serene feel, and it just feels like it, you know, for a reading with the Reclaim, this deck could sort of use as a balm and a message and, you know, a way to get a step forward in terms of how to deal with what the Reclaim Oracle has identified for you. So I love the idea of using it in that context. The reason why I haven't really worked with this deck yet is that this was a Kickstarter, and to be perfectly honest, like, the Kickstarter did not go well. I'm not going to get into too many details, but it was not a responsibly run Kickstarter. Let's put it that way. I'll leave it at that. It just kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. I know I'll get over that eventually. And like I said, I do feel like pairing this with the Reclaim is like the perfect way to use it. And so I know I will want to use it someday. I'm just sort of like still letting myself kind of like get over it with respect to how the Kickstarter had gone with this deck. So anyway, that again is the I'm Here Oracle. I do look forward to using it at some point. I just haven't quite gotten there yet. The second prompt is the 12th deck from the right on your tarot shelf. And this was kind of a difficult one to interpret because A, I have multiple tarot shelves, and B, I also have a bunch of decks hanging on hooks or on racks. So this was a little bit difficult to interpret. So I just took the top of my tarot shelves, ignored what was hanging, and just counted from the right 12. And the one that I got to is this one, which is the Tarot de Squa by Lisa Squa. And this is just a wonderful deck. This is the second edition of the deck. The first edition had huge like orange borders on it, which I wasn't a huge fan of, but this edition that is borderless, and it comes in a nice like magnetic box. It's really nice. This deck has beautiful artwork. It's really special. This deck has some interesting takes on a number of the cards, and I do really enjoy it. And now that I'm looking at it, actually also, I'm sort of like, I need to get this deck out again sometime soon, because it's been a while since I read with it, and it's a really lovely deck. So again, this was the 12th deck from the right on my top tarot shelf, ignoring the decks that were hanging on racks. And this is again the Tarot de Squa by Lisa Squa. So next up is a deck you are thinking about rehoming, and this one won't be a surprise to anyone who has watched Three Girls One Deck recently. I got this deck, I backed this deck in a Kickstarter, and I like the deck. I like the deck a lot. You'll notice that I have already put it back in order because that's how sure I am that I probably want to rehome this one. I have worked with it. It's a really lovely deck. I really like how it turned out. The artwork of this deck is just really fun. But around the time that I sort of had wrapped up my time working with this deck, where I'd enjoyed it, but it hadn't like blown my hair back or anything. And then I found this other cat deck that I really love, which is called Enchanted Forest Felines. And for some reason, that deck just spoke to me much more than this one. I do really like this one. I like it a lot. I like the artwork. I really like the overall style of it. But as you can kind of see, the artwork has a little bit of a like kind of static feel, I guess. When I compare this one to that other cat deck that I really like, even though this one is so sweet, like I said, love the artwork. But I just feel like I'm probably not going to reach for this one if I have that other one, because they both have kind of like a storybook cats kind of quality, but the other one is a little bit more vibrantly colored, and it's a little bit more dynamic in its artwork. And so I just have a feeling like I'm probably not going to reach for this one. So it's going to be in purgatory for a while. I'm not going to like rush getting rid of it or anything like that, but I kind of have a feeling that this one might end up going out the door at some point. So anyway, that is the cat tarot. So next prompt is a deck that you don't store in its original box and why. This is a box. It is in the shape of a book. And this is the deck where I store my Centennial Rider-Waite-Smith. I don't read with this deck. I keep it as a study deck. I always like to have just a really, really basic, straight up, very classic looking copy of the Rider-Waite-Smith on hand to use as a study deck. And so I keep it in the book box because like I literally keep this on the shelf shelved with all of my other like tarot reference books, you know, because this deck is a reference. It's not really a reading deck, it's a reference deck. So I don't know, keeping it in the book box somehow feels right. And I also, any decks that originally come in a tuck box, I always try to find some other way of storing them because I hate tuck boxes and like they always end up like ripped and destroyed and falling apart. And so so I always, you know, look for a box or a bag for any deck that originally came in a tuck box, and this one did. So again, you know, the book box is kind of the perfect thing to keep it in since it is a reference deck. It actually fits in this book box pretty much perfectly, so it's kind of a good home for it. So the next prompt is a deck with more or less than 78 cards, and I actually chose the same deck for this prompt that Julie from Peekaboo Rose did. So not to copy or anything, but this is Bunkan Tarot, which is a deck that she and I and Heather from Bookish Downtime all created together, and it is a deck based on the Korean band BTS. And the reason why I chose this one specifically, lots of decks come with extra cards, and I don't always leave them in. You know, in a lot of instances, I'd say I don't leave in extra cards that come with the deck, except under certain specific circumstances, one of which is if the extra card is a happy squirrel. I'm going to talk a little bit more about happy squirrels and why they're important to me later on. But for Bunkan Tarot, we actually created 7 different happy squirrel cards. Each member of BTS has basically like an animal emoji associated with them. That this is common in K-pop. It's, you know, just a way to like shorthand identify each of the members, especially like on Twitter where you have character limits and stuff. You know, these emojis are just shorthand, except normally the alpaca emoji is not used for Jin, but long story, I won't get into all of it. But in any case, we made happy squirrel cards or happy animal cards for basically each of the 7 members of the group, and I leave all 7 of these in the deck when I read with this deck. And the reason is because each of these happy squirrel cards actually has a different meaning for me when I read based on the particular member who is featured in the card. Like each of them I interpret as having a different specific message, and so I leave all 7 of them in the deck. And that's not, like I said, not typical for me to leave a whole bunch of extra cards in the deck. And this is one of the rare occasions where I do that is with Bunkan Tarot. So that, again, is a deck that the way I use it actually has 85 cards as opposed to 78. The next prompt is a deck with a cloud on the box. And for that, I chose the Bohemian Gothic. And I do actually have this in one of the Baba Studios bags, which are really beautiful, but the deck itself I do actually keep in the box inside the bag, and because these clamshell boxes are really nice. The clouds on the cover of this box I find amusing. It's, you know, they're just sort of like covering up the moon, and it's got this whole like, you know, spooky Gothic vibe to the artwork, so that's really fun. I absolutely adore this deck. This is like one of my favorite sort of spooky season kinds of decks. You know, I love to pull this one out around Halloween time. I think just for me, I really love the vibe of this. It's not too like in your face kind of horror, like it's not gory or anything like that. And it has this sort of like really kind of campy Gothic horror vibe to it, which I just think is so amusing. I greatly enjoy this deck. So anyway, again, that is the Bohemian Gothic Tarot. So the next prompt is a deck that you've never shown on your channel. And I really struggled with this prompt because I've had my channel for almost 7 years, and it's possible that I have shown this deck on my channel and I've just forgotten about it because it was just really hard for me thinking through all of my decks, trying to figure out like, okay, which ones have I shown, which ones haven't I shown, because I feel like at the end of the day, I've probably shown almost all of them. I had a really hard time thinking of ones that I hadn't shown. I couldn't remember having ever shown this one, but that doesn't mean I haven't. So if I got this wrong, then, you know, sorry, I just forgot. But anyway, this is actually the Minute Tarot. This is a deck by Robin Tish Hollister. And one of the reasons I think that I have not shown this deck on my channel very often is that this deck is super, super out of print. You kind of feel bad showing really out of print decks on the channel, but this is such an adorable, fun little deck. It's really small. And the way the artwork was done with this deck is that it was sort of an unblocking exercise for the artist when she drew this deck. Basically, she challenged herself to draw every single piece of artwork on the deck in less than 5 minutes using Sharpie. So that's how this deck was created. Each of these artworks took less than 5 minutes, and they were all drawn using Sharpie. And because of that, the whole deck has just this really kind of like loose, anarchic, slightly chaotic feeling to the artwork. You know, it's just, I don't know, I just find it really, really charming and fun to look at. And it's a nice small deck, so it's a fun little deck to travel with. I do find myself grabbing this deck a lot if I'm going to be going out of town, because it's just really small. It doesn't take up very much space. You know, I have it stored in a little bag, and so it's just a really easy deck to grab. It's very traditional imagery, but done in this very kind of loose, quirky, enjoyable style. I really like this deck a lot. I enjoy it thoroughly. And again, if I have shown it before, I'm sorry, I couldn't remember when I had, so this is the one that I ended up going with, but it's quite possible I have shown it and I just don't remember. So the next prompt is a deck with another animal besides a lion on the strength card, and this is the Maraloon Tarot. Here are the backs. This is a really, really lovely deck. I really love this one. The artwork of it is so beautiful. The reason I picked this one is because, you know, I think a lot of strength cards, if they don't have a lion, what you see is another ferocious animal, you know, or threatening animal. Like if it's not a lion, it's usually a bear or a wolf, or I've seen wild boars, you know, they're usually animals like that. And so this one I feel like is really unusual in that it has a deer on the strength card. And the reason I really connect to this a lot is because when you think about the interpretation of the strength card, where, you know, potentially the animal in the card represents your shadow, you know, it represents some part of your own psyche that you're trying to tame, or that you are having trouble with taming. And, you know, for a lot of people that's anger, you know, or some kind of, you know, really difficult emotion that is best exemplified by a very ferocious animal. But in my case, I would say that most typically for me, my shadow is often exemplified by fear. And so having a prey animal like a deer on the strength card to embody that side of me, you know, rather than taming the wild beast, this is soothing the frightened beast on the strength card. And like that for me really resonates, because a lot of my personal shadow is more based around fear than it is things like anger. So this one just really works for me, and I love this deck. It's so beautiful. Like, it's just these beautiful pastel colors, lovely artwork. I've always really enjoyed this one, and yeah, but this strength card in particular is one of the things that I really connect to about this deck. So the next prompt is a deck that comes in a box inside another box. And for me, I always like it when that happens, especially if it's a nice box inside the big box, because I don't generally tend to store decks inside their big boxes. If a deck comes in a large box, I will take the deck out and put it in a bag or another box and put the large box into storage, just because I don't have enough space for all of those big boxes to be taking up. So when a deck comes inside a big box, but there's also a very nice small box just for the deck inside of that, I always really like that. And so this is an example of that. This is the How to Deal Tarot, which was originally called the Squa Tarot. This is the what was a mass market version of the Squa Tarot. So some of the cards are different. I think this deck was pretty much sold at like Urban Outfitters, I believe, is where this deck was originally sold. I don't think it's available anymore, but it's a really great deck. I will say that the book that it came with, which is called How to Deal Tarot for something, it wasn't a very good book, to be perfectly honest. But again, this is the Squa Tarot. It was known as a tarot deck before it was created in a mass market edition to go with that book. And it's just, this is such a great deck. I love the colors. I love the art style. Like, it's fun. It's got a little bit of a quirky vibe to it. It's really beautiful. I enjoy this deck a lot. So yeah, this again is known as the How to Deal Tarot in this edition, but prior to that, it was known as the Squa Tarot. Yeah, this is just such a fun deck. I really, really enjoy it. I feel like I should, you know, get it out more often. So the next up is a deck that would not appear in a top 10 favorites video. And I wanted to sort of interpret this in a charitable way, because I don't want to be like, oh, I have this deck, but I don't like it at all. Like, that's not, you know, that's sort of not how I wanted to interpret this. You know, I sort of wanted to interpret this as a deck where even if it may not appear in my top 10 favorites, it's still a really solid deck that I like having and would never dream of rehoming. And so the deck that I chose for that prompt is the Darkness of Light Tarot, which I haven't actually gotten out in a while, and I really should, like this fall in particular, take this deck out because I enjoy this deck a lot. As you can see, it does have kind of a dark aesthetic to it, which is why I think this is a really great deck in particular for use in sort of like the fall and winter months. There is some kind of color themes going on as far as most of the coins have kind of brown in them. There's pink in all of the wands. There's some blue in all of the swords. But so it's a really lovely deck. It's really beautifully created. I like it a lot. It's a good workhorse deck. It's a good solid reader. It's the kind of deck that I do pull out to read for other people sometimes because it has a very just sort of like neutral, kind of impersonal vibe, I guess is maybe the word that I'm looking for. Like it feels sort of like the dark equivalent of the Fountain Tarot for me, where it has this sort of very neutral feel to it that makes it feel like it works in any situation. And so it's a lovely deck and I'd never get rid of it. It's not like one of my top favorites, but it's a super solid deck that when I use it, I always have a great experience with it, and it kind of fits in to my collection in a very nice way. So again, that is the Darkness of Light Tarot. So for the next prompt, my answer felt kind of obvious. The prompt was a deck that you associate with the color green, and for me, I pulled out my Greenwich Tarot, unsurprisingly, as a deck that I associate with the color green. Not only are the backs green, but there is a lot of foliage and greenery in the cards. It has a very outdoorsy, kind of pastoral, bucolic sort of feel. There's plants in every one of the cards along with an animal, and all of the plants and animals in the cards have specific meanings that are covered in the guidebook. The Fool is the green man, like it, this is a pretty on the nose choice, I feel like, for a deck that you associate with the color green, but this is a really beautiful one. I always call this like my Pagan Hobbiton deck because it just feels like going into a lovely fantasy world full of lovely witches, like living in a little village, and I don't know, something about it. I just really enjoy the feel of this deck. So again, that is the Greenwich Tarot. So next up is a deck that was secondhand, pre-loved, pre-owned, or thrifted. For this one, I chose the Hues Tarot. So this deck I actually purchased when it was already out of print, and I got it from one of the tarot buy sell trade groups on Facebook, and I really like this deck a lot. I think the artwork is really beautiful. It has this slightly watercolory but also slightly collaged feel to it. You can see the use of a lot of things like marbled paper in it. There's a lot of like maps and other sort of ephemera that have been used in it, along with this very beautiful artwork. And again, I'm pretty sure this deck is still out of print, but it's a lovely deck and I've always enjoyed it. I think it's really beautiful. I like reading with it. It's a nice deck. But yeah, it was already out of print when I got it, so I did have to buy it secondhand, but it was a very good price because I don't think this deck is like super in demand, but I don't know, I like it. I would never imagine letting go of it because I do really enjoy the artwork. So again, that is the Hues Tarot, Hudes. So the next prompt is the deck in your collection with the most used guidebook. For this, I had to pick the Herb Crafters Tarot because I love this deck and I do use it a lot, but I always use it with the guidebook. So this guidebook is very well used. You guys know how much I love this deck if you watch my channel at all. Like, I am not an herb crafter in any way, shape, or form. I do not have strong plant knowledge or anything like that, but I adore this deck. I adore the artwork of it, but I do, I always pull out the guidebook when I work with it. I only work with this deck for myself, really, because I do need the guidebook to read with it effectively, but it's still just such a lovely deck to work with. I just adore this deck. It really feels like it takes you into the natural world when you're reading with it, and the way that they have associated the plants with the card meanings is really, really intelligently done. There's a beautiful system to this deck that is very well explained in the guidebook. This is a fabulous deck, but I do always use it with the guidebook. That again is the Herb Crafters Tarot. So the next prompt is a deck with water on the box, and since I used a Baba Studios deck for the deck with clouds on the box prompt, I decided to go back to the Baba Studio as well for the deck with water on the box. And so this is the Tarot of Prague, and as you can see, the moon card is on the front of the box, and the moon card shows the famous bridge in Prague over the river. So there's a lot of water in that particular image, and this is just such a lovely, beautiful, cool deck. I'm not often a huge collage decks person. Like, I'm very picky about collage decks, and this one is entirely collaged together by artworks and landmarks located in the city of Prague. And you can see that it's a lot of like artwork that doesn't necessarily go together, but the way that it's been combined, I think, is really cool. It's really witty, and it just, I don't know, this is the type of collage that really works for me. Like, I think it's very thoughtfully done collage, and you know, it's a Baba Studios deck, so the quality is beautiful. There's a lot of gilding on the cards. It's gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous deck. So again, this is the Tarot of Prague by Baba Studio. This is my deck with water on the box. So the final prompt is a deck that has your most favorite card ever. I brought out my Touchstone Tarot, and you guys probably already know which card I'm going to talk about because I've talked about it even recently. But again, the Touchstone Tarot, love this deck, adore this deck. It is the deck that I normally consider to be my soul deck. I absolutely love this deck. I work with it a lot. I've had it for a very long time, and it's just a deck that is really special to me. I never, ever read for anybody else with this deck. I just feel like I have a really special bond and personal relationship with all the people in this deck. So it's very personal, but one of the things I love most about this deck is that it's the first deck I ever owned that had a Happy Squirrel card. And the thing about Happy Squirrel cards is, I'm sure most people know, it's a joke from The Simpsons. There's a Simpsons episode from, I think, the late 90s where Lisa Simpson goes to a Renaissance fair and gets her cards read by a tarot reader at the Renaissance fair, and it's one of my favorite episodes. It's all about Lisa's future. And, you know, one of the gags in the episode is that the tarot reader turns over this super cute card labeled the Happy Squirrel, and then is like, oh no, the Happy Squirrel. It's quite funny. And so the Happy Squirrel card to me, because The Simpsons also actually has a really special meaning to me, The Simpsons is the one thing in my life that I can always find joy in. And for those of you who don't know, I do struggle from clinical depression. I have it very well under control these days, but when I do have a depressive episode, like, the one thing that I can always enjoy and laugh at and smile at is The Simpsons. And when I was, especially in law school, I think the worst depressive episode I ever went through in my life was my third year of law school, which was like 2004. And at the time, again, the only thing that I could do to have fun was watch The Simpsons. And I literally had this like massive box of just VHS tapes of random Simpsons episodes, because I would set my VCR to record the Simpsons reruns every night, and like just had this box of tapes that I could just throw on if I was really struggling and just watch episodes of The Simpsons. And so the fact that this card is specifically from a Simpsons episode, and so I have that association with it, it has a special meaning to me. The show has a special meaning to me. The card has a special meaning to me. I really associate it with just that feeling of joy in a dark time. A joyful message in a dark time is basically the way that I always read the Happy Squirrel card. And so when a deck has a Happy Squirrel card, I always leave it in. That is like the one extra card that I will always leave in, is a Happy Squirrel. So yeah, that is my tale of Happy Squirrel cards and my favorite deck, and just one of the cards that I really connect to in this wonderful deck. So anyway, again, that is the Happy Squirrel card in the Touchstone Tarot. And that's it. I want to thank Angel from Feeding My Soul 1212 again for this list of great prompts. They were super fun and creative, and I just had a great time picking out the decks to go along with each of these prompts. So thanks again for hanging out with me while we took a look at some of the decks in my collection and I showed you my decks. Have a great one, everybody. Bye-bye.